I know it sounds amazing, but it's true. President Trump has only been in office for 2 weeks, but he has certainly made the most of his time in the White House, already appointing a Supreme Court nominee, managed to alienate some of our staunchest allies like Australia and Mexico, worrying Europe with his talk about NATO, his shoot from the hip style, institute a far-ranging travel ban that is causing turmoil here as well as across the globe, including most particularly the Mideast, and do not forget about the flurry of executive orders. But the American people are not apparently impressed. Brand new numbers are out from CBS News, and they show his approval rating is well underwater, sitting at just 40%. That's the lowest since 1953 when Gallup has started doing this. You can see every other president since Dwight Eisenhower has been well above water in their first month in office, except for our Commander-in-Chief, Donald J. Trump. Professor Alan Sanders is here, and he is discussing here not only what's going on, but what we can expect. And if history is a guide, he's a political science professor at St. Peter's University in Jersey City. He was great help with us during the inauguration. Should we have known then, first of all, what we were getting into? Because even with a campaign season behind us, it's taken a whole lot of people aback at the rate and the volume of change, but also seemingly the back of the envelope nature of it. What surprised you most in the last 2 weeks, or first 2 weeks?
Well, nothing really has surprised me about Donald Trump because he's been a surprise from the get-go. And so the fact that he's a surprising president is no surprise. I mean, if you followed his campaign, it was a roller coaster ride, and his presidency is turning out to be a roller coaster ride. You know, it used to be that we watched presidents grow gray, and but the way he's been behaving, it's actually maybe the American people that are going to go gray prematurely.
He could get more orange. Now, you know, I was literally rattling off in 30 seconds. We mentioned some of them. There's questions of constitutionality above what we said. He's had tweeting wars with Arnold Schwarzenegger. You cannot make this stuff up. The fights over the crowd sizes and the vote counts, seemingly relitigating the election, the huge protests that we've seen, and they don't seem to be ebbing, with more expected this weekend, including on our region. The rollbacks, the repeals, the lawsuits, the questions of conflicts of interest, the internal power struggles, who's calling the shots right now. Questions about fake news. We've seen the confirmation battles. There seemingly is a fatigue already. Again, we have no guide, can we look to history, that even when presidents walked into, whether it be economic calamities, whether what Obama inherited or certainly what FDR soon thereafter inherited, or even nations, whether it be at war or coming off of war, seemingly he had a honeymoon if he chose to exercise it. He's chosen, you know, to drop the gauntlet and start basically fights with everybody, both domestic and abroad.
That's right. He's been a belligerent president. He was a belligerent candidate, and he's a belligerent president. He's running against really the basic framework of our government. And that's one of the reasons I think you are beginning to see some fatigue. The government was purposefully designed to work slowly. The framers created 3 separate branches with checks and balances. And that was really the framework to be sure that the government did not act precipitously. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, he's a very precipitous kind of guy. And so what he's finding is that, okay, he can make all kinds of announcements, but the Congress may not necessarily follow, nor may the American people necessarily follow. Still a little early. Not much has actually happened beyond words, although of course we've had the immigration issue in recent days. But in terms of actual programs government-wide, not all that much has happened. But if he continues to operate this way, I think he's going to run across and against the checks and balances of the system.
You mentioned the 3 branches, Congress, and to me this is going to be the key pivot here, because I just showed the poll numbers underwater. Historically, no one's remotely been this way, especially at this point of their presidency. But yet, if you look at his base and you look in Republican districts, which is probably the key number here, he's still running 80–85% approval rating, maybe even a little bit above. I guess the thinking is, once all of a sudden there's a pushback there, and it gets below, let's say, 80 to 70, 65%, then all of a sudden we might see some pushback, because it's not a monolith, the Republican Party. I mean, you have the Freedom Caucus, who doesn't want to spend a dime where the revenue doesn't offset, and then you've got folks that are in blue states that are Republicans who are worried about re-election when you're ticking off basically every social constituency you can name. That's a group that needs to be watched, as well as Democrats who have to figure out, are the protests their base here, or is it the other folks who want to see government run efficiently? It's a kabuki dance right now in Washington,
Absolutely. And one of the reasons you're seeing the Republicans being a little uncomfortable, particularly on Obamacare, because if they repeal Obamacare, they have to replace it with something. And the something will, of course, impact the base that Donald Trump captured during the elections. So they're not sure how to behave on Obamacare, because that might have an impact on that base. Also, I think you're seeing the Democrats adopt a position that's kind of interesting. They don't have the power to block things at the moment because they're the minority, but they're going out of their way to make sure that the Republicans own whatever Trump decides to do.
But they have to pick their fights. And
yes,
do you
they do.
think, for example, Gorsuch, the Supreme Court nominee, you know, they can threaten all they want, but the president's already teed it up that if they go the nuclear option, they're not going to have the votes if they stick on party lines to stop his confirmation. And he seems, by all accounts, forgetting his political bent here, to be eminently qualified for the position. They have to make that choice now, don't they, as to where is our line in the sand?
That's right. They're in a bit of a dilemma here because clearly the nominee is very highly qualified, but he's also very conservative. In many ways, might be more conservative than Justice Scalia. So they have to decide where to make their fight. But where they make their fight, I think they're going out of the way to tell the American people this is the Republicans going along with Trump. I think the strategy is long term. And of course, the Republicans right now, being loyal Republicans, want to be loyal to their president. So they have the upper hand at the moment. I think the Democrats are playing a long-term game. We'll have to see what the long-term game of the Republicans are, because, you know, we're experiencing whiplash. They're experiencing whiplash too, because we're getting pronouncements from the president every day, sometime every hour, and some of them are contradictory. So I think everybody's kind of feeling out the new territory, not quite sure where they should be.
He does seem to be checking off the election promises, whether people liked him or not. He does seem to be going down the list, whether it's the wall, it's repealing the ACA, it's repealing some of the regulations on Wall Street, whatever else. Maybe they're not finished, but he's at least touching on what he said he'd do.
He's checking off boxes. He's basically acting as disruptor in chief. That is the consistency. Disrupt the status quo, disrupt the expectations. But it's not exactly clear what it will be replaced with. What we will have to wait and see is what legislation, what actual rules follow from this. But certainly the only script so far is disruptor in chief.
So get used to it. We've never seen anything like this before, and don't look for history as a guide here, because we're in uncharted territory.
Stay tuned, and to the extent you can, enjoy the ride.
Good luck with that one. All right, coming up next, issue much closer to home. Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant, they're getting ready to shutter their doors, but why did it decide to shut them now? Was it simple economics, political pressure from Governor Cuomo, or the cost to relicense? Will a VP at the plant of the owner Entergy? Well, they'll join us here to explain. Stay with us.